Welcome to the Healthy Home Show. I'm your host, Fernanda Furman. I'm a healthy home architect.
Hi, I'm Eric Furman, healthy home contractor.
And today we're here with Andrew Pace. Andrew, welcome to our show.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, I have been listening to your podcast for a long time. So for me, when I thought about this show, you were one of the first people that came to my mind, because I know you and Jay have been doing a great job at, researching and being on top of what's going on in the industry. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be interviewing you today.
Well, like I say, I'm really excited to be here. It's always fun to share stories and history and knowledge, and there isn't enough situations like this. There's not enough out there. So I applaud you both for putting in the effort to put this together, because it certainly takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. And the funniest thing is, like, when we started putting the show together, it's a passion project for us.
Oh, yeah.
Because I got sick. And actually, before we go into that, let's tell everybody who you are and read your biography so they understand who you are. And then we're going to get into our conversation, because we have so much to talk about.
Excellent.
Yeah. Again, thanks for joining the show. Let's see. Andrew Pace is the founder and owner of GDC Building for Health. And you're going to have to pronounce this one for me. Waukesha.
Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Waukesha, Wisconsin. We know Wisconsin. I have some family there. He launched the company in 1992 and is now the premier retailer of green and healthy home building and improvement products and consulting in the U.S. Andy Pace has become a nationally recognized expert on green and healthy building products. Along with being profiled in numerous publications, Andy Pace has authored several articles about the construction of healthy homes, which have been published in regional and national magazines, and has successfully assisted over 25,000 homeowners with their home remodeling and new construction projects. He is a past board member of the GBC WI, Wisconsin, I'm assuming, affiliate, and is a two-time president of the Construction Specifications Institute of Milwaukee chapter and current board member of the International Institute of Building Biology and Ecology. He produces a weekly podcast called The Non-Toxic Environments, where he and his co-host, Jay Watts from AFM Safecoat, discuss all aspects of healthy and sustainable building practices. Welcome, and it is so exciting to have you here. This is a very needed subject on our show, so thank you so much.
I love it. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So, how did you start in this path? Like, for us, as you're saying, like this, it's a passion for us right now, because I got ill inside of my own home. And after 2 years going from doctor to doctor, spending all money, doing all the blood tests, and nobody could tell me what was going on other than just telling me I was fine, and still drugged me. Like, oh, here's some prescription drugs, not drug me. But they still get it. That's my Brazilian. You're going to hear some funny things here. So they still gave me prescription drugs. And for me, it was way more than that. We couldn't realize what it was until we start spending time outside of the house, like 4 or 5 days. And I just didn't have that daily headaches. I had more energy. And I had, I was a different person. And Eric didn't have the allergies either. So when we came back home, symptoms were back. That's when we realized it was the building that was our home, that it's one of the topics you are going to talk about, and how the green, getting our homes green actually are making us sick.
Right. Well, interestingly enough, it's unfortunate, but that you actually experience one of those ways that somebody can become chemically sensitive. It's that typically low level exposure over a long period of time. So it's this cumulative effect in the body, absorbing toxins, and most people have the ability to sort of filter them out. And that's what the body's systems are for. Some people don't. And there's no rhyme or reason to when the tipping point becomes. You'll probably hear this from other speakers, but I've been using an analogy for years that we're all born with this drum inside of our body that collects all these toxins and pollutants that we're exposed to on a daily basis. And at the bottom of that drum, it's the ability for the body to filter it out. Well, some people, that drum gets filled up faster and faster and faster. And by the time it starts to overflow on the top, that's when we become chemically sensitive. And those who are what are called either MCS, multiply chemically sensitive, or universal reactors, any chemical that's petrochemically related to the one that caused that tipping point can give you the exact same reaction. And so to step back, my history in this business is back in the early 90s, about 1991, I was involved in a commercial construction project in Milwaukee. And my background is architecture and commercial construction. And I started in a family business that dates back to the 1930s. And so it was my job to work with architects and engineers to make sure they're specifying and detailing the right products for certain types of construction. This happened to be a below-grade parking structure in Milwaukee, and we specified and supplied a water-based epoxy coating for the below-grade parking structure. Now, this is 1991. Everybody thought water-based meant safe. We didn't even think of, the toxicity issues because it's water-based. And I'll get to that in a second. But after our crew applied the primer coat of a 3-step system, people living in the condominiums above the parking structure and the tower above started calling and complaining of the fumes. Mm-hmm. And we had everything masked off properly. We cordoned off all of the return air grills, and the air movement was all protected, so we didn't think anything could transfer out of that area. Of course, it got up through the elevator shafts and so forth. So people complaining about the odors. One of them happened to be a United States Senator who was working out of his Milwaukee office at that time. But the real eye-opening event was when 3 of our own workers had to be rushed to the hospital because of inhalation complications.
Wow.
They literally lost their breath because the curing epoxies took away all the oxygen in the room. And we learned the hard way that building materials can cause serious reactions. And, as a small family-owned business, we all kind of got together and said, we can't be poisoning our customers and poisoning the occupants and our workers selling materials. And so we put the job on hold, really searched around the country for something that could finish the project. And we stumbled upon a small company in California called AFM Safecoat. And through them, we were able to finish the project, but it was an eye-opening experience for me. I have some sensitivities myself, but nothing like what my clients go through. But because of that situation, we completely revamped what we sell, how we sell. I started a very small company to sell what I called at the time common sense building materials. This is before the U.S. Green Building Council was even a glint in somebody's eye. This is before the green building movement even got started in its infancy stages. So we just sold common sense building materials, and that just blossomed into what we have today. The biggest problem we've had, though, over all of this time is all of the manufacturers and suppliers, retailers, so-called experts that have rushed to this, jump on this bandwagon without actually looking at the documentation that shows that their products are any healthier for humans. Materials, homes, offices, everything's being sold as being green and eco-friendly. But by today's standards, the system that we were using in that below-grade parking structure some almost 30 years ago was actually considered environmentally friendly, was actually considered green.
Wow.
Green and healthy are 2 completely different things, and so few individuals in this country talk about the differences. So that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. You bring up so many things that ring true and bring back memories of our own journey. Fernanda's also from an architectural background as an architect in Brazil and also here in the States. I myself have seen quite a few commercial projects, military projects, was part of the whole LEED certified type of building movement that happened here. And then on the residential side, the upgrade California energy upgrade initiatives. And, it's like, where's the balance, right? It's like, for example, I'm really curious, going back to the epoxies, we've seen this in paints and caulkings, is where's the balance of something that lasts for a long time? Like, for example, lead in paint was amazing, but then there's all these pros and cons and potential side effects. Is where are you on the journey now? And what are the advantages of still having something that's safe and healthy and then also has the longevity aspects of it as well?
That is an ongoing issue, but that's also an ongoing issue with all building materials, whether they're considered green, healthy, or just traditional. Sure. The fact of the matter is that the industry does not like anything new. And I know this because think of a painting contractor. Painting contractor gets paid based upon how much work they can get done on a daily basis. Yep. Somebody goes to them and says, please use this product on my job. And they say, I've never used it before. I don't know what the production is going to be, how many square feet I can cover. And they raise the price as the just in case. What if I don't have enough time built into this job?
Absolutely.
And then they use one product maybe 20 years ago that was considered low or zero VOC, and they had a horrible experience with it. And that's now tainted everything from that point. Yeah. And so we have to go back and say, this is a high quality product. It hasn't been around for over 30 years because it's not. I mean, obviously there are some very happy people using this material, but it requires contractors, requires builders, homeowners to have an open mind towards using products and choose wisely, set the priorities correctly. That's a big thing. If you were to buy a premium grade paint, for instance, let's forget any environmental or health benefits whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Premium grade paints, residential premium grade paint is the absolute best paint you can buy. Commercial architectural grade paint is the worst paint you can buy from a longevity standpoint, because it's only designed to last 3 to 5 years, because that's the average of repainting in the commercial industry. Homeowners want to paint their home and never touch it again because it's such a pain to do, right? Sure. Moving everything around and hiring the right people and whatnot. It's disruption. So residential premium grade is the best paint you can buy. Now, put on top of that, provide something that doesn't off gas. And everybody then jumps towards zero VOC because we've been conditioned by the industry to look for low to zero VOC. Most people don't realize that the only reason why VOCs are actually regulated in the US by the EPA is because of outdoor air pollution. The EPA does not regulate products for human health concerns. They're not the HPA, they're the EPA. So when manufacturers are told they have to take all the VOCs out of their products, whether it's paint, flooring materials, you name it, they are allowed to add back in one of 37 different unregulated carbon-based molecules to be used and not have to disclose.
My goodness.
This is why several paint manufacturers have been sued, class action lawsuits over the years, because their zero VOC paint was making people sicker. Wow. Acetone, ammonia, butyl acetate. I mean, we all know what acetone is, right? That's nail polish remover.
Right.
Acetone used in paints and coatings is considered zero VOC. So it doesn't have to be put onto an MSDS. It doesn't have to be on a label. It doesn't have to be disclosed. Again, the EPA is not the HPA. So we look for products that have a serious track record of being well tolerated and used by those most chemically sensitive that we can find. And essentially, our background of 25,000 customers who have extreme chemical sensitivity really gives us a leg up on anybody to be able to say, we know what they can tolerate, therefore most people will be able to tolerate this.
That makes sense. So, and I think I would guess that that's where the degree of green was, how it was born, right?
That is correct. Yes, because again, my background with the U.S. Green Building Council, I helped to start the Wisconsin Green Built Home Program years ago. My background on all that basically gave me the knowledge that all of these building rating systems, LEED is a rating system for buildings. It's, leadership in energy and environmental design. Nowhere in that title has anything to do with human health. But they all use what we call the gatekeepers, the third-party certifiers, to allow us to use products or systems. Those third-party gatekeepers are essentially make it or break it for these manufacturers. Well, about 5% of all building projects done nationwide have anything to do with a green building rating system. So manufacturers spend billions of dollars to get their products rated just to be used on over maybe 5% of the projects. Well, what about 95% of the public that doesn't want to have a rating system to remodel a bathroom? They just want to use products that aren't going to kill them, products that are more sustainable because they use fast growth species for flooring materials and so forth. So I developed Degree of Green as a building product rating system, not to help the gatekeepers and not to help the LEED specifiers, but to help the average consumer who is just trying to do the right thing, knowing that every consumer, their definition of the right thing is different. There are three main customers that walk into one of our showrooms. The first one says, I've got a 7-year-old with autism, and he cannot be around any chemical off-gassing. We've seen this, that autistic children have a hard time with chemical off-gassing. It exacerbates their symptoms and the severity of their problems. And so she says, we need to build a home that's completely free of toxic off-gassing. So that's customer number one. Customer number two walks in and says, I've been on this earth for 57 years. I've been a burden to the earth for 57 years. I want to remodel a home using all recycled, repurposed, and renewed materials. Completely different customer from the first one. Third customer walks in and says, I want to build a home with the lowest carbon footprint. Now, out of those three customers, which one is wrong?
Yeah, none. It's
none
just
of them.
their priority.
Their priorities are different, but yet the industry paints everybody with the same broad brush and they call it green. Therefore, the term green and all those other words that are basically just words that don't really mean anything, they confuse people into buying products that aren't really what they're trying to achieve. If you buy products that are eco-friendly and green and air safe and zero VOC, you're not necessarily buying anything that's healthier for you. You're buying something that meets regulations and it's good for the outdoor air quality. So Degree of Green, and then through our consulting and the podcast, of course, this is how we are teaching people to look for materials and systems themselves that meets their personal degree of green.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
One of the things, obviously, one of the biggest hurdles too, like for example, our home, when we moved in here, it was a 30-year-old home. We didn't tear down any walls, but we did all kinds of things to it, including closing it all up and energy sealing it, which is when we started experiencing all the problems. So besides paint, what would be some of the other things in an existing home when you're doing kind of a renovation, so to speak, like maybe a new kitchen, new bathroom? What should we be looking out for? And this also ties into what are some of the biggest offenders of health in building materials that are in an existing home that you're probably bringing in?
Sure. It's a great question because, people will always say, what's that sweet spot of the time when the home was built that would be safe to live in now? You have to find something that hasn't been necessarily remodeled, because most people who are remodeling a home just to sell it aren't using decent quality products, or normally aren't. And so you're experiencing more off-gassing. But I'll step back and say that there's 4 areas of the home and things you can see and touch that will account for over 90% of the toxicity issues related to building materials inside of your home. That would be your flooring choices, your wall finishes, your cabinetry and woodwork, and then your own personal furnishings and finishes, furniture, window treatments, things like that. Those 4 general areas will account for 90% of the toxicity in your home. So what do I look for first? The first thing I'll tell clients is rip out any carpet you have in your house. Period. End of story.
Yes.
There are a couple of synthetic chemical-free carpets available here in the US, but out of the billions of square feet of carpet installed every year in the US, a fraction is from one of these companies. So I'm usually pretty safe by saying, unless you have, Earthweaver Nature's carpet, rip out your carpet because it will off-gas for the lifespan of it.
The lifespan.
Wow.
Correct.
Wow. Yeah.
Can I So I don't want to, there's so many things I want to talk to you about.
Off-gas lifespan. That is huge.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I stop you there for 1 second? Because this is what I really want to communicate to people is, in an effort to do those things, everyone's different, not creating other problems. So for example, we got rid of all the carpet when we moved in here, but we put in formaldehyde-laden, glued down floor everywhere.
Yes.
And then, because of decor and also little kids, we put in rugs, which are carpets.
Yes.
Collecting like the high piled
Well, yeah,
rugs
luckily
that
that
were
one's
beautiful and
Sure.
yeah.
Well, let me give you an example of a job I worked on a few years ago. I had a client that was up in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, and they had about 5,000 square feet of newly installed pre-finished hardwood floor in their house. Within weeks of the installation, everybody in the house started getting sick, flu-like symptoms.
Yeah.
They called in 2 indoor air quality scientists. They called in a building biologist up in the area. And finally, the last person they brought in said, there's formaldehyde. Everybody knew there was formaldehyde in the house, but they couldn't actually say for sure because they were looking at, probably a $60,000 remove and replace to put in something healthy.
Wow.
Understandably, they said, we need to make sure it's this before we actually do it. So I drove up there, and I have a system called a FRAT system, formaldehyde release attenuation test. It's the only test of its kind in the world. We can actually pinpoint individual surfaces in the home that's releasing formaldehyde, and it's accurate down to 1 part per billion.
Wow.
So when I went up there on a Saturday, put FRAT tests all over the house. Within about 2 hours, we determined that the hardwood floor throughout the house was perfectly safe, at least from formaldehyde. There was no formaldehyde off-gassing from any of the floor anywhere in the house. But all the area rugs they installed, they probably had a dozen area rugs, really high-quality products, very expensive. All the area rugs in the home attributed to formaldehyde levels in the ambient air close to 200 parts per billion. The safe level, according to LEED, is 27 parts per billion. According to NIOSH, it's around 40. They're over about 200. And it was really bad in the bedrooms where they had a lot of area rugs because you want something soft underfoot.
Yeah.
So I said, take all the area rugs, put them in the garage. Let me know how you feel tomorrow. I got home to Milwaukee area about 5.5 hours later that night, and I had an email already saying we are all starting to feel better. Now, this is about 2 years ago, and I was actually working with them to help them design a healthy home because they thought they might not be able to remediate this house at all. They still live in this house today, 0 symptoms, all because of the area rugs. So to answer your question, Eric, you have to not only remove the offenders, but you have to put back in something that's not going to do the same thing in just a different format. And there's been tests done on carpeting, and Dr. Rosalind Anderson did testing years ago, and she found that carpet that was up to 22, 23 years old was still off-gassing enough to kill laboratory rats.
My goodness.
I have personally tested carpeting that's 27 and 28 years old in people's homes that's off-gassing formaldehyde at the rate of 100 to 500 parts per billion.
Wow.
What?
I just tested new carpeting from a manufacturer that they claim they don't use any formaldehyde, and they put it in these green homes, certified green homes, and people are getting sick. That's off-gassing 150 parts per billion. And it turns out, well, they don't use formaldehyde in the carpet, but the manufacturer of the carpet fiber, they use dyes that contain formaldehyde. So legally, they don't use formaldehyde in the manufacturing, but the fiber manufacturers do. So that's how they get around to be able to say they don't use formaldehyde, yet it's getting high scores in our testing. So you really have to be careful.
Seriously. So you guys have become almost like an EWG, environmental working group, where people can go and get much better information from a private third party, like, hey, look, this is what's working. Here's our experience. What a great
and
thing
feedback from the people that are using it, which I think is even like better than anything else, because that is a real certification, certified by people.
Yeah.
Well, and we don't publish the results for the most part because, listen, I'm not in the business of being a gatekeeper for these manufacturers. That's what those third-party certifications are for. That's why manufacturers spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get their products certified, and they can take the test as many times as they want to get the best results, by the way. I do this because I have homeowners saying there's a problem. Well, I help them find the problem. We solve that problem. That information that I create is their information. It's not for me to say, here it is, folks. You don't want to use XYZ brand's product because it's toxic. I'm not looking to put companies out of business, and I'm not looking to get myself sued either. Yeah. I'm looking to help customers. My business over the years has gone from being selling materials to homeowners all over the world to now consulting on new home and remodeling projects all over the world. And I feel like there's much more satisfaction that I'm getting because I'm actually helping people through the process and allowing them to find their own voice and find their comfort zone with the materials and the methods and how they interact with their contractors and trades.
Mm-hmm. Which is huge, because what I see in the industry, like I tried to talk to some of the contractors. We're doing some residential work here in San Diego, and I'm trying to talk to the contractors just to see how they were about, creating healthier buildings. Mm-hmm. And all of them came back with this answer: we have been building like this for hundreds of years, and it's totally fine. This is just a fad.
Yes, of course, that's the way they say it.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I really want to highlight right now, is that if somebody that is listening to this, watching this interview, and you have issues or you're trying to avoid them and you are remodeling your home, then contacting Andrew, it's going to be, I think, for me at this point, would be where I would go if I had to do any remodel, and make sure, because when you're remodeling, that tells you that, okay, I'm going to stay in this house for a long time. So when you look at the initial price of things, it could cost more, but in the long term, it will cost less, especially like I work from home. Do you know how much it costs me to stay in bed until 9 o'clock in the morning because I don't have energy to get up? Right. That costs me a lot of money. It's less than having healthy materials or healthy furniture in my house that I have to invest a little bit more upfront, but in the long term, it's cost less.
It's such a great point, because remodeling a home is far more invasive than building new. Mm-hmm. Building new, you're not living in it while it's being put up. Remodeling, you have to deal with it, and every manufacturer will say, oh, once it's cured, it's fine, don't worry about it, which is not true. I mean, I could go off on a tangent, but once a product is cured, that's when off-gassing starts. Off-gassing is not curing, two completely different things. However, even if it did, once it fully cured, it didn't off-gas at all, even if that were true, you're still living there during the curing process. paints and coatings and adhesives and mastics and so forth, they take usually up to 2 weeks to reach a full cure. You may not smell it that long because the smell of something has nothing to do with the off gassing, and what it's actually releasing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then when that happened to me was also like we install all of our dual panel windows, doors,
Right.
and then Eric installed the air conditioner in our home. So then the air conditioning was running because it was summer the whole time. So I'm locked inside of the house, working from home with all those new flooring, new painting, new windows, and now the air is recirculating and no
Right.
fresh air.
Want to enhance the effect of the chemicals for you.
Wow. Exactly right.
Wow.
And so this is where I would say the question comes up all the time with clients who are either interested in remodeling or building new. They're stuck. They don't know which way to go because you hear horror stories from people building new houses, and how invasive it is to remodel.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, in just about any situation, building new is the better way to go if you do have severe sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the fact that the average new home built today has about 15,000 chemicals in the air at any given time. That's the average new home. Take a home that we've been involved in to help them choose the right materials to use. We're cutting that down to a fraction of that. I can also verify each and every item that goes into that house, all the way down to the screws and nails holding it together. In a remodeling project, once you start peeling wallpaper and taking down drywall, you're like peeling layers of an onion, but you never know what the next layer is going to be.
Yeah.
You could actually expose yourself to something you had no idea was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we will almost always recommend building new.
Yeah, you bring up another really good point, especially here. We have a lot of homes that were built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s when they were still using lead paints, and then also asbestos inside of flooring material. So you go ripping up linoleum that has a backing of asbestos. You get into the attics where they have asbestos, and I start disturbing all of that. Wow. So some advice for people thinking about remodeling and things off gassing potentially forever.
Sure.
What are some helpful tips? Or, I mean, it's a different process thinking about remodeling versus a new home. How and what should they do before they start preparing for even a small bathroom remodel, for example?
Well, boy, that's a tough question because
Sure.
everybody sort of processes information differently.
Yeah.
But you definitely have to put together a checklist. And working with somebody, whether it's somebody like me or even working with an interior designer, somebody who can help put together a checklist of all the things that need to be done on the project. If you don't have anybody you can hire, then at least talk to family and friends who have gone through the process themselves. You have to set your expectations correctly. And this is a big one that I stress with all my clients. The expectation sometimes is when this is done, it's going to be perfect. I'll be able to live in it, no problem. And that's the absolute wrong expectation to have. We actually strive for tolerance and acceptance of the project. We do not strive towards perfection because that's impossible.
Yes.
You're going to drive yourself to the poorhouse or the nut house or both, trying to build or remodel the perfect home, and it just does not happen. So set your expectations properly.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's it's funny, the same terms and themes keep coming up, and you could definitely get into the analysis paralysis. And I really like what you said about it's not about perfection. And then you also mentioned something I never even thought about before is there's also 3 different types of customers, and their expectations about, okay, is this not creating a carbon footprint, or am I chemically sensitive? And then you have the individuals living in there and they have different things going on with them. And there's just so much to consider.
And that's why for us, we don't believe in one size fits all.
Absolutely.
Like you go to a store, oh, this is the product. and this is how you do things. Like for water filtration systems, people sell water filtration systems that one size fits all.
Right.
They don't take in consideration what pipes you have in your home, or where your water is coming from, or what you want to remove from it. So there's so many different layers that it goes into a project, into a remodel, or just choosing one flooring, for example, that as you mentioned, that needs to be taken in consideration. I love all the points you were making because they're so clear. And one of the things that I see the most, and you already talked about it, is the marketing that they put into the product that makes it hard for us to understand, even reading the labels. And I remember buying this brand that I trust, and that's what I want to make the point is about trusting who you talk to. And I trust this brand, and then one of their products, when I looked on the back, it says, oh, it's made with essential oils, doesn't have A, B, C. It doesn't have, the list of doesn't have was huge. Mm-hmm. And then when I looked on the back, it says made with essential oils and synthetic fragrances.
Okay.
So that defeats all the purpose, that everything that I was looking for in a safe, and non-toxic product.
Right.
So I think it goes back again to the trusting the manufacturer, trusting who you talk to. So you have all of that knowledge, and you understand how things are made, and you understand policies, which is huge, understanding policies in brands that you already have experienced by the feedback, by testing. Right. So I think like you sound like you are a one-stop shop. Like you were the person, like you're remodeling a home, call Andrew right now.
Well, thank you. It's been tough for 20 some years being one of the sole voices in the industry talking about these things, because, you had mentioned before, Eric, analysis paralysis. Well, I talk about this with my clients all the time. We mentioned on the podcast too. Anybody can Google search terms, and then they'll call up and say, well, I've done a bunch of research and this is what I need. And I'll say, well, I'm kind of curious where you got that information from, because that sounds like manufacturer talking points. Mm-hmm. And it turns out, well, they didn't actually, people love, and I love the fact that they like to empower themselves to do research, but they're not doing research. Internet searching is not research. Internet searching is essentially electronically flipping through manufacturers' catalogs. Yeah. And they're going to tell you what they want to tell you. They're not going to tell you that, they were enjoining a class action lawsuit because their zero VOC paint actually made people sicker than their regular paint. They're not going to tell you that. They're going to say all the words you want to hear. And then people go, all right, well, that's all I want to know, because if I learn any more, I might get disillusioned, and I really want to use this product because it's convenient. And that's the other thing. We have to kind of get away from the fact that sometimes doing the right thing is not convenient.
Yes.
Sometimes it takes an extra day or two to get product on site. Sometimes it means not getting the exact aesthetic you're trying to go for. Mm-hmm. And so with the Degree of Green program, I actually created a questionnaire years ago that I give to my clients, and I find out which degree of green they truly are. Mm-hmm. And they may think it's one. Turns out it's something completely different. They just didn't want to say that because it sounds better to say one. And then I'll say, but you can't get all three. You can only have one or two, but you can't have all three legs of that stool. At some point in the project, you're going to have to make a decision based on budget, availability, usability, whatever the case is. You have to make a decision, and it may go against your aesthetic. It may go against availability. But if you truly want a healthy home, this is what you have to do. If you don't do this, then you really don't want a healthy home. You want a sort of healthy home that looks really cool. Mm-hmm. And this is where we talk about setting your priorities, setting your expectations. These are things that you're not going to find in internet research. These are things you're going to find talking to me, doing consulting. You're going to hear on a podcast. You may talk to you hear from others across the country. These are things that you two are probably have experienced and why you've put this whole series together.
Mm-hmm.
When customers say they've done research, 99 times out of 100, they haven't actually done research. They've read marketing pieces. And I spend 9 out of 10 hours a day on the phone with consulting clients. And yes, that's how often we're doing consulting. 9 out of 10 hours essentially re-educating people to what is actually happening and not just what the marketing people have said.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. We're on such the same page. And yeah, it is definitely a misuse of the term research. That is definitely just looking into things on a much grander scale now that there's so much information, and it's almost information overload. There's something that I really talk to people about too is these movements, right? For example, where greenwashing is coming from and saving the environment and stuff. So in an effort to do those, we create a movement, which turns into a business and then eventually turns into a racket. And so could we, especially for California's listeners too, there's been such a movement towards saving the environment. And what I'm seeing in both commercial and residential is not really thinking everything completely through. Like, for example, things like a synthetic plastic lawn that is going to last maybe 25 years. And what happens to that green plastic carpet that you put outside and even during the time that it's there in 20 years, you know? So what are the long-term effects of those types of things?
Boy, you know, there's a saying that we use here every day. And that saying is, what good does it do to save the environment if we're still poisoning all its occupants?
Yeah.
And, you know, your example of, so we all know that utilizing something that you don't have to water all the time is better for water conservation, especially in California. To put down, but people still want that aesthetic, right? This is what's driving the whole thing. And so manufacturers of this synthetic grass, they know that it's plastic. They know that every bit of plastic that's ever been manufactured in this country still exists because you can't get rid of it. So they know all of this, but then they say, how do we get people to buy this? Well, we tag it to a cause. We tag it to a feeling. We tug on those heartstrings, you know, and this is where greenwashing really comes from. You know, just because something is made from recycled content or is recyclable has nothing to do with the greater picture of whether it's even safe for us to use.
Right.
Think of when you see manufacturers say that their products are green because everything is made here locally made. Well, locally made from parts that come from China and Korea and Japan and so forth. So what good is it being locally made?
Yeah.
Biodegradable. What good is making something biodegradable if there is no regulation for how long it takes to biodegrade to be able to call it biodegradable? A styrofoam cup will biodegrade in about 400 years.
Wow.
Does that make it green? Of course not. So those are the ways that manufacturers sort of tug at you. And they understand that there's a market for these materials because most people don't want to dig in deep. They'll do their internet Google research and they'll stop there, because as soon as they find one bit of information that's contradictory to what they want, they'll say, I don't want to learn anymore, because they don't want to know the downsides. They don't want to know that maybe this beautiful wall covering or this beautiful set of cabinets that hits all those high notes for being green will off-gas formaldehyde for 20 years, but I don't want to know that because it's green. Somebody said it's green. Good. I don't have to think about it anymore. Out of sight, out of mind. But yet somebody in the house gets sick and they don't correlate the reason why.
Yeah.
That's true. And it's the other thing I see a lot in the groups that I have been, non-toxic groups. I see a lot of people giving advice, and
Oh,
there was a lady she was about to remodel her kitchen, and this other girl says, oh my gosh, you need to buy IKEA cabinets. They're the best non-toxic cabinets.
mhm.
And I went back and I asked the lady why, and she said, well, because I heard from another group. Somebody in another group that's very knowledgeable said that IKEA cabinets are non-toxic.
Mm.
And just because they're less toxic than what you would buy because of the finishes or less formaldehyde based on the quality insurance that they have in Europe, doesn't mean it's not toxic.
Correct. That's
Right?
exactly right.
So that's where I see where the confusion gets too. Like one person hears something, they listen this into or read this in somewhere else's blog that they think it's very knowledgeable, and then they start spreading this information as the truth. And now IKEA became a non-toxic cabinet out of the blue, and I'm like, that's far from reality. It just has less because of the restrictions.
Right.
But in cabinets, for example, you mentioned cabinetry. If somebody has to look for a cabinet, what would be the things that they should be looking at?
Well, understand that there are no production grade kitchen cabinets available in the US that are made with completely healthy ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, there's not a lot that goes into a cabinet. The manufacturing and the style, that's the, what takes all the skill. The plywood or solid wood that they use, you can get those formaldehyde free. The wood glues that they use, none of them are formaldehyde free. I've tested them all. And the finishes that they use. So those are the three things that go into cabinetry. Of course, hinges and, things like that, and pulls and knobs. But the three main ingredients: the wood, the glue, the finish. No production cabinetry company in the US uses finishes that are completely free of chemical off-gassing. And the reason is because of requirements by kitchen manufacturers associations that say you have to be able to stack pieces in 15 to 20 minutes so they can produce large quantities. In order to do that, you got to use a lot of solvents. And I mentioned this earlier when we first started, that I thought water-based meant safe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the industry, in order to be called a water-based finish, only 50% of the liquid component needs to be water. The rest can be whatever solvent you wish. And if you use, right now, the trend is to use VOC regulated or VOC exempt solvents, acetone, ammonia, butyl acetate, and combinations thereof, because now they can call their products low or zero VOC, even though they contain these toxic solvents that off gas. So there is no company that can say, here's who you call. We actually work with cabinet makers, individuals all over the country, and these independent custom cabinet makers will use healthier finishes.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to get them to try it out. The production companies just won't do it. This is where we have to then look at the overall project and say, yeah, cabinets can be a big source of pollutant in the house, but what's the goal here? If we can reduce everything else in the home, floors that don't off-gas formaldehyde, paints and finishes that don't, insulation that's formaldehyde free, caulking materials and so forth, all this stuff, we can get all that down to zero. Well, then maybe there's room in the somewhat, a health budget to be able to use a good quality cabinet that uses formaldehyde-free plywood, and that's as far as they go, because at least it's better than not.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where there's no set answer for anybody. We just have to work with the client to determine what the next best step is.
Yeah, something that keeps coming up in my mind, and it's really like a mental mind shift, because I think us as humans, we strive for perfection. We want to do our best, but you almost have to kind of let go. I'm just kind of talking out loud here. I'm just thinking, it's like, as a customer, and you have to make a decision at some point. And I like the degree of green. It's like you're going to have to live somewhere. You're going to have to live in that home. So you're going to have to pull the trigger and just know that you've done your best and kind of move on, really, because you're just going to get stuck.
You're going to get stuck. You have to make sure that, and this is one of the tips I give everybody, the bedrooms are the most important rooms of the home.
Yes.
Case closed.
Yeah.
If you can only afford to put completely chemical off-gassing free products in any rooms in your home, put them in the bedrooms.
Yeah.
We hope to get 6 to 8 hours of sleep every night. This is where you're going to recharge. This has to be the safest room. Now, clients walked into the showroom just last week, and of course, she says, "But I want carpet underneath my feet when I wake up in the middle of the night." I understand that. I understand that you do, but look at the big picture. Just for a slight bit of inconvenience of having to put on a pair of slippers, you're going to improve your overall health dramatically. Carpet in a bedroom is, you might as well just, open up a can of, a bottle of formalin right there in your bedroom. It's got to be the safest room in the house. So yes, you have to strive towards acceptance, tolerance, the best you can do. There's always give and take. And this is why you just can't go to a website and say, all right, well, this is what I need. Well, based on what? Based upon the pictures looking nice and the description sounding really cool. Mm-hmm. You really have to focus on what's important. We probably pass up on a lot of material sales on a daily and weekly basis because customers are going to be buying the wrong product, and we just don't want to be involved in that. Mm-hmm. We'd rather have them use the right product for what they're trying to achieve and be happy. And, we're not looking to sell volume. We're looking to help people.
So on the carpeting, because I'm really concerned now.
That's Me too.
We've got some talking to do after this. So we met Rowena Finnegan, who is on this show. I don't know if you've met her. She's out in Sausalito, California. And she has basically, kind of like you, personal experience and helped with suppliers build some really safe products. And one of them she mentions is the textile type of thing with drapery. And in your experience, have you seen a safer type of floor covering that you could use?
In lieu of carpet?
Yeah, like wools come up, or there's certain ways of doing wool. Yeah, like an area rug. So let's say you have a hard surface floor. Okay. These other things that come up too. A lot of the reason why we did that is we had infants around the home, and then you have like, okay, what if he falls out of his crib onto a carpet versus a concrete floor, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's all these conversations that come up in your head. Is like, what is safe, so
right. Again, this is why everybody's situation is different, of course. Sure. But if somebody asks for something soft underfoot, yes, there are wool area rugs but you have to be very careful about the wool that you buy.
Yeah.
If you buy traditional wool carpeting and have it made into an area rug, traditional wool carpeting still has chemical dyes, flame retardants. The backing is made with SBR, which is styrene butadiene rubber. Mm-hmm. That's usually where 85% of the toxicity comes from, by the way. So you have to be looking for wool products that are not made with any of those pesticides, chemical dyes, flame retardants. The backing is made from cotton, hemp, jute, and natural latex right from the rubber tree. Mm-hmm. There are some cotton products available online from India that are really nice, that meet this criteria. They may use vegetable dyes, but they don't use any chemical synthetic dyes. But the other thing is, understand that if you're trying to make the room as safe as possible, both from a off-gassing standpoint and from a comfort, infant standpoint, then maybe it can't look like a high-end rug with a great design and all these different colors.
Right.
You might have to go to something that is just a natural wool, natural sheep color of gray or off-white. Mm-hmm. Just be thankful that you have something that's completely free of chemical off-gassing.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
again, setting expectations, setting priorities.
Yeah.
And that's where some people, they're so connected with interior design and they want everything that's in the magazine high end, and they don't understand the consequences of having. You can still have a beautiful home that is non-toxic. It
Yes.
might not look as high end or something you see on the magazine that you can copy, but it can still look amazing using the right products.
Well, back to what I said earlier, building materials off gas for the lifespan of them.
Mhm.
Just remember that everything you buy from countertops to window treatments, anything you see and touch will off gas for the lifespan of it. I mean, even zero VOC paint will off gas between 2.5 and 4.5 years after it reaches a full cure. You may not smell it. You don't smell carbon monoxide either.
Mhm.
Just because something has a smell doesn't mean it's dangerous. Just because something is odorless doesn't make it safe.
Yeah.
What's your experience with insulation inside the walls and in the attic? Because that comes up a lot in what we do for people. And according to the research, I've changed that term. According to the information that I've found from the manufacturers and what's
Right.
happened, at least here in California, supposedly they stopped putting in formaldehyde in insulation, I think around 2015, maybe it had been earlier. But what I have found is they claim, I would be really curious to see what you've seen, is they say it off gases maybe 5 to 10 years and then it's done. But from what you're telling me, it's probably not correct.
Well, it depends. It depends on what it's off gassing.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, when I look at off gassing of materials, I am solely focused on formaldehyde.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, there's close to 90,000 different chemicals used in the production of building materials and home goods right now.
My goodness.
I look at formaldehyde because formaldehyde is a key trigger. Formaldehyde is a trigger for an asthma attack, and it's ubiquitous. Formaldehyde is in everything, and we've seen over the last 20 plus years that you take the formaldehyde away, and people start to feel better. I am not a doctor. You have others who have been on that can speak to this better than I can, but I've worked with enough physicians over the years to know the ramifications of formaldehyde exposure.
Mhm.
There are manufacturers of formaldehyde-free fiberglass that will list all of their ingredients. And the ones that I use are nothing but sand, glass, and mineral oil, period.
Mm.
Now, in most building projects, I will go with a formaldehyde-free fiberglass in any iteration, whether it's blown in, a bat. I'll go with formaldehyde-free fiberglass over just about any other insulation material available. I avoid spray foam like the plague. I don't like it at all.
Mhm.
Spray foam contains not only formaldehyde, but also what's called an isocyanate, or MDI. Isocyanates are essentially the catalyst. The reason why those two parts of liquid come together after the spray tip and create that foam is because of the chemical reaction of the isocyanates. Isocyanates are inherently dangerous. Out of all the chemicals out there, I actually have a personal sensitivity to isocyanate. If I come in contact with one, I'll actually get a rash head to toe. My skin will turn to leather.
Wow.
They're horribly dangerous.
Mhm.
Formaldehyde is going to be in there not because it's an ingredient, but because it's part of the flame retardants that are used. And this is another thing too about all building materials. When manufacturers say they don't use formaldehyde, they're not telling you formaldehyde is not going to emit. They're telling you they don't actually add in formaldehyde as an ingredient. There's a whole classification of chemical ingredients called formaldehyde donors or formaldehyde precursors. These are chemicals that by themselves are undetectable, or they might be detectable, but they're somewhat no problem. But once it starts to cure, once it starts to combine onto the surface, it'll create formaldehyde during the curing process. So that's how they get around those regulations. This is
Mhm.
why we've tested flooring materials and wood glues and wallpaper paste and all these materials that would cure on site. and they're off-gassing toxic levels of formaldehyde, even though there's not formaldehyde in the ingredients list. It's because they use precursors. And so that's so hard. In any research you do, you're not going to find that information. I wish I could publish all my results, but I just, that's not what we're here for. We're here to help individuals and not just call out manufacturers.
Yeah. And it's got to be tough to, we are a water filtration manufacturer as well. And it's in an effort to help people. Now, for example, California has slapped a,
Prop 65.
Yeah, Prop 65 warning label that needs to be on every piece of it. So anybody manufacturing and selling water treatment equipment in California has to have that on there, unless you spend, millions and millions of dollars for each element of it. And so I've had several conversations with people manufacturing the housings that have been around and had all these other certifications, just like, we're not going to participate in this. So now that warning becomes a joke, basically.
Right.
And, yeah, it's really tough. I mean, we've opened up a huge Pandora's box, but I guess the biggest takeaways are as the demand increases, the information gets out there, there are solutions. You're never going to be perfect. So take a deep breath and, you've got these elements. So these are the biggest elements to take care of that knock out 90% of the problems. And, we're not going to be able to go live in a box because that has in a cave, which we say a lot, that has its problems too. So
yeah, one of the things that I have been trying to empower people to do is to use their voice. Like I call people, I call manufacturers, I call CVS company, and it's like, why do you have Red 40 and all this polysorbate 80 in the kids' Tylenol or kids' drugs that when they need to reduce their fever? Why do you guys? Well, I don't know. So I do concern, I express my concern to them. If they're going to do it or not, I don't know. But at least what I have been trying to tell people is like, voice your concern. Go to the company's website. Now with social media, we're able to do that easily.
Yes.
And Dove just removed aluminum from one of their deodorants. So that means they are listening. They are
listening. You're right. Yeah,
yeah,
well, this is why formaldehyde is not in insulation anymore. Yeah. And the manufacturers will say it has nothing to do with human health, because if they admit it has to do with human health, then they open themselves up to lawsuits because they supplied how many millions of square feet of it in the last 20 years. So they're going to say it's because the resins are better, they're more stable, it lasts longer, it's got better moisture resistance, all these other things. They're not going to focus on health. They're not going to say anything about health. But manufacturers are listening, especially now, because they realize that the information gets out so fast, the negative information.
Right.
Now, this is also a downside. The fact of the matter is that sometimes that negative information or positive information is inaccurate. You had mentioned it just before when somebody says, use IKEA cabinets, they're non-toxic. This is why I really got out of the game of answering a lot of technical questions online, and I speak with people. I don't write a lot anymore because the written word can be manipulated. People can take little bits and pieces of it and then share it, and they're not sharing the whole story. I was asked to be involved in a online group for one of the other speakers in your series, and we had a very lengthy conversation before she pulled the plug on the online forum she had, because people without a great amount of knowledge, without professional experience, without technical experience, were saying, oh, use this, it'll be great. Well, you could be recommending something to somebody who has a severe sensitivity to one of those ingredients, and now who's liable? Well, you're not, because you're just somebody sharing information, but somebody could then end up suing me or somebody else because I was the professional that was involved with the group. So you really have to be careful with the information. Everything is somewhat user beware, buyer beware, do your own research, but I'll give you all the tools that I can to help you make your own educated decision. And that's really the goal.
Love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You said so right. And it's, I love it.
Excellent.
And for you listeners, Andy has an amazing gift for you. And he's going to be giving to the audience 10 minutes of a free consultation. So I'm going to put the link to his scheduling right down below this interview, and you're going to be able to click in there and go set up your 10-minute consultation with Andy. Don't miss out on that opportunity, because that is very, very valuable. And it could be that conversation that will save your kids from having a lot of allergy issues, or it could actually bring you one step ahead of building a healthy home. And Andrew, thank you so much for being here. Do you have any final words, anything else you want to share?
Final words, folks. Listen to all of the speakers in this series, because they're all very important, bringing different perspectives. I have a tendency sometimes to scare people, and I don't really mean to, but these are all serious issues. Yeah. And understand that there's almost always a healthier, safer way to go, or a safer, healthier product to use. But you just have to ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this awareness is what, for us, we didn't know what to look for. We didn't know, even you mentioned something very important, ask the right questions. We didn't know even what to ask, because there was no information available for mm-hmm. us when we started this. And it was out there. We just didn't know it was out there.
Right. You have to, and that's the thing. It's, why does the industry not go to all of this completely, is because people aren't asking the right questions, and they're not asking the right questions because they know the people they're talking to probably won't have the answers. Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of finding the right people to trust. Listening to things like this gives us all a lot more knowledge and experience. We have a better vernacular to work with when we're speaking with other professionals. But this is very, very important for everybody.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough. Seriously. I mean, It takes people like you and kind of environments like this to kind of help. Even myself through all of this is like changing my mindset around certain things, and
we are we're doing changes ourselves. Yeah. Every time we interview somebody, there's a lot of things we are changing. Like we don't know it all.
Yeah.
We're good at what we do, but we don't know it all. So that's where we need to, reach out to people like you, like the doctors, like other speakers that have their own knowledge in different areas that we can all together come up with a better plan.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
I really appreciate being a part of this. Thank you.